So, I do not know why this memory has just come up, but I've been thinking about my childhood. These last few days, I woke up drenched in sweat, and even though at first I couldn't say why, I think I am finally ready to face my past. I do not know how old I was when this happened. 8, maybe 9. Back then, my family had just moved into a small house in the suburbs. My parents weren't rich, but we definitely lived comfortably, and I never saw them worry about money, which by today's standards. I digress. I still remember some parts of that house vividly. My own room, up on the second floor. A mailbox, white and red. My dad's garage where he kept the car and his motorcycle. The white picket fence with the small gate. My mom's rose bushes, and the trellis that had convinced her to choose that house right at the first moment she had laid eyes upon it. You know what that is, right? That strange wooden framework that lets plants climb up the facade of your house. My mom loved the idea, and when I talked with her a few days ago, she brought it up again, which I think made me remember as well. It all started about a year after we moved in. Late at night, hours past my bedtime, I was still up in my room, reading and playing. I couldn't tell you for the life of me what I was reading or what kept me awake, but I think I can remember quite a few instances of myself enjoying the night and the calmness after everyone else had gone to sleep back then. It was kind of my thing, you could say. Whatever. I remember hearing those footsteps outside while still playing with my toys, and somehow, something about them drew my attention. Maybe it was because it was already late at night, or maybe they stood out because the neighborhood wasn't even lively during the day, much less after the sun had gone down. Or was it because they weren't normal footsteps, not the sounds of someone walking down the street, but rather of a person dancing? It disturbs me to this day. I downed my toys and went to the window to take a look at what was happening. We had 3 street lamps along the road running past my parents' house, and just between the one on the right and the one almost in front of the property, I could see him, a guy, dressed in what I would describe as a gaudy outfit, complete with a top hat on his head, was slowly coming down the street. I do not know what kind of dance he imitated, but it had to be one of those ballroom ones, I think. He was twirling around, had his arms raised as if he had a partner, and kept to this strange rhythm all along. I was kinda intrigued, to be honest. It looked funny and non-threatening, at least until the man suddenly stopped. It was like he had frozen mid-dance, had his head turned to the side while he was balancing on one foot. Yeah, I think that was the first time in my life I felt uneasy. Something was wrong about that man, I remember thinking then. I froze as the strange man leisurely turned his head, then his shoulders, then slowly whirled around on his one foot. He looked up at me, not just at the house, but at me. I felt it back then, and I can still remember it so vividly, this feeling of eyes staring right into my soul. I watched helplessly as the man raised his hand and started waving. It might sound like a nice gesture, but believe me, I whimpered when I saw it. His face was covered by the shadow of the brim of his head, and yet I could still feel it, that he wasn't smiling. I pushed myself away from the window, jumped into my bed, and pulled the blanket quickly over my head. A very childish reaction, right? I mean, my soul. I was a child, scared and afraid because I still thought Mom or Dad might punish me if they found out I had stayed up past bedtime again. So I tried to resolve this mess on my own. Honestly, I should have screamed my head off then and there, but I didn't. I kept cowering beneath the blanket, listening for the noise of the man returning to his normal dance routine, but that didn't happen either. All I could hear was the beating of my own heart, right up in my ears. I was crying while I held the blanket over my head and prayed silently for the man to just disappear. Why didn't the footsteps start up again? I asked myself. How had he noticed me? Up here, standing silently in my dark room. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would break my ribs, and then the one noise I dreaded more than anything reached my ears. The gate to our lawn swung open. I was shaking in my bed. This strange man was coming, my mind told me. Coming for me. I kept listening, but couldn't even hear his footsteps. My heart was still racing, drowning out the sound of my own thoughts. What if he rang the doorbell? Would someone open the door for him? I felt myself whimpering again, then clasped one hand over my mouth to stop any noise from coming out. Maybe the man didn't know where I was, I told myself. As long as I stayed extra quiet, he might just turn around and leave again. Looking back now, I really was completely out of my mind from fright. I could feel my lungs starting to burn with the hand still clasped tightly over my mouth. The only sound I could hear was my heartbeat. No one was ringing the doorbell. No one was walking around outside. I started letting out air again and tried to keep my breath shallow and silent, but failed miserably. Something about that sight had shaken me to my core. But now there was no noise coming from the man anymore. Seconds passed that felt like an eternity. Then minutes. Slowly, my heartbeat sank and my breathing returned to normally. I was still cowering beneath my blanket, still shaking like a leaf while my pajamas were drenched in sweat, but nothing happened outside anymore. To keep myself from completely spiraling, I started to count my breaths. First to 100, then 2, then 3. Nothing happened. The night outside my window was calm and almost silent. There were no scratching noises, no footsteps, nor anything like that. I began wondering if I had just imagined the sound of the gate before. After a few more minutes, I even felt my muscles relaxing a bit. The blanket wasn't shaking anymore as my own tremors slowed, then stopped. Had I just imagined it all? In my childish mind, that really did seem possible. I wasn't sure if the man had existed at all, if I even had been awake before. Maybe it all was just a bad dream, I told myself. Slowly, I lowered the blanket. Just a bit at first, enough to take a look at the window. The night outside was as dark and calm as before. I kept staring at it, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. My chest was still hurting and my lungs seemed strained, but I soon began to feel at least a little bit more at ease. Pushing the blanket to my feet, I ever so slowly started to move. First, I only put one foot out of bed, looked at the window and found it still the same as before. Then the other leg. All the while I was listening for any noise or sound from outside. But nothing was going on out there, so I stood up from the bed. Was it just bravado? An urge to prove to myself that I wasn't a scared little child? No. The thing that drove me on the most was that I knew I wouldn't be able to fall asleep if I didn't look outside at least once. All those nightmares would keep me awake. I knew. So I ducked down and started to sneak toward the window. Always on the watch for anything happening outside, I slowly crept forward. Even though I tried to tell myself that it had all been nothing but a dream, part of me still warned me not to be careless. I remember those moments so well. The smell of my room. The toys lying on the floor making me step around them to keep the noise to a minimum. The sight of the moon, full and bright, up in the sky between the stars. My hands were shaking slightly, and I could feel my heart rate picking up once more. The top of the street lamp came into view. I crept forward, past the small desk and the chair. The fence of our neighbor's lawn was calm and closed and looked just like the one here. I started to grow hopeful. It had all been just a dream. Another step, and I was only one more away from the window. The night was calm, yet I could still feel this strange tension. I swallowed my fear, took one more breath, then pushed myself forward. Down there by the street lamp was the gate in the white picket fence. It stood open. I could feel my heart almost jumping out of my chest. Sweat was running down my cheeks. In the light of the lamp, I could see something more. Footsteps in the wet grass, leading straight across the lawn toward the house, toward the trellis. My mind seemed to crumble. I couldn't move my body anymore. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The shadowy shape of a gaudy suit blowing in the soft breeze right next to my window. Face half covered in darkness. Eyes that looked down at me through the pane, staring right into my soul. He was grinning. I felt it more than I saw it. Grinning while staring at me. His face came closer to the window, and I stood there like a deer in headlights. I couldn't even scream, so scared was I. The sound of him smacking his lips has been engraved in my mind. I do not know what he planned, or even wanted. All I can remember now is the noise the struts of the trellis gave off as the man shifted forward and tried to grab hold of my window's frame. this low moaning noise just before they broke. He let out a scream, and with it, I cried out as well, shouting for my mom and dad as the man fell down and howled in anger. Lights turned on all around the street as I ran away from the window and headed toward my parents' bedroom. I do not really remember what happened next, only that my dad removed every last piece of the trellis the following day, and my mom stayed with me wherever I went from then on for what felt like a year. I slept in my parents' room for the next few months, and soon after, we moved again. Somehow, I must have buried this whole episode somewhere deep in my mind. It only came up again when Mom talked about the trellis she used to have and the great plans she had for it, but never could turn into reality. Dad has already passed away, and I have my own family and children now to take care of. We live in a small, calm suburb with nice and inexpensive schools close by. Only, yesterday I woke up during the night. I remember it because that normally never happens. As I was lying there next to my partner, I heard it, the sound of footsteps dancing along the street. My daughter is 7. She's got the room next to us on the second floor. God, Dad, I think we need to move.